Welcome to SHOWstudio. It's the men's shows over in Milan, and I've got a fabulous set of panellists with me who've dragged themselves into SHOWstudio on an incredibly hot day, chosen to be here to talk about the Prada collection over sitting in the park, so I'm very impressed. We're going to be delving a little bit into sort of the business side of fashion with this discussion, as well as looking specifically at the Prada show. I think it's a really interesting time in terms of the way different brands are structuring their companies and the way that they're releasing their collections. Prada have obviously made some changes recently, so they've jumped on the sort of cruise bandwagon, was doing a big resort show, lots of attendees, lots of press, a big catwalk show, which is not something that they've particularly engaged with before. So I think they're a really interesting example of the way that brands are having to reconsider and change their schedules, particularly when it comes to showing. Before we jump into our discussions, I'll just let my fabulous set of panellists introduce themselves.
Sure. My name is Karinna Nobbs, and I am a freelance digital and retail strategist.
My name is Mimma Viglezio, and I'm a creative consultant.
My name is Mandi, Lennard, and I run a fashion consultancy called Mandi's Basement.
And my name is Trino. I've managed and been CEOs of various companies in the UK and New York. I'm currently running the Stoppard Foundation.
Trino, I'm going to go to you first because, as you said, you've worked with lots of different companies. And just talk to me a little bit, what did you make of the fact that Prada selected to do the show for the first time in doing the resort show? Obviously, we're going to look at their men's show, but they just did that a few weeks back. And what is your thoughts of the current focus and obsession with these big cruise shows? And I presume you're going to say it's very different for every brand, but just tell me.
You know, I always say that.
But I think it is interesting that it is so different. And it's such a time of change. You know, you've got other brands who are sort of repositioning their entire schedule. So their main line is almost going to be their cruise collect. They're going to show and sell it at the time of doing the cruise show, which is something that Vetements have done for a while and SHOWstudio are now starting to do. And yeah, just tell me a little bit about why there's this newfound importance on cruise.
I think everybody now has to look at the business and how it's divided up. And you're divided up by the product, the wholesale business and retail business, and then you're divided up by creating press and buzz and generating noise about your product. Mm-hmm. So you have to, every business has to look at what stage they're at in their business and what's needed. Mm-hmm. So you see a lot of the really a lot of the big brands that have their own stores that don't need wholesale accounts, so they don't need to worry so much about their delivery dates, but they do have to engage their customer. And these big events, it's not that they're inviting wholesale accounts to go and see, to fly to the Louis Vuitton show and the Chanel show. It's their top customers who have been taken over there and the press. So they're engaging what the retail stores can do. And then you've got the, I think Prada have been a little slow in deciding what they were going to do to drive their business, because other brands have made a decision quite quickly on what's important to them. And when you talk about like Proenza now showing and people wanting to show in couture weeks, that's purely a wholesale benefit because you've got the time to take your orders, which deliver the product in the time, get your product made, get it delivered, and still have a good sell-through before these awful sales kick in, which as a wholesaler, when you're selling to, I don't know, a Selfridges, a Len Crawford, you're at the mercy of, if your product isn't there in time for it to actually get sell-through, then your business is failing. So I think everybody really is looking at what the stage of their business is. Do they engage are they looking at making sure their wholesale business, their product is delivered, they have time to make the product in the quality they want, and whether they have, if they've got a retail business, which all of the big brands we talk about, I mean, Prada certainly has its retail, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, all of those, Valentino, they've all got retail stores. They're not as dependent on the wholesale customer, and so they're looking at drive their money through the retail stores, which is most of their revenue is probably coming from.
Do you think that we'll see a point, it's interesting to get everyone else's opinion on this, do you think that we'll see a point where the timeline of fashion will shift completely, where everyone is showing around the time that the couture collections have traditionally been, because business-wise it makes more sense? Or because there is this strange thing where cruise, actually, for most brands, is so much more of their business than the main line is, and the main line exists kind of as this focal point for press, but it's not actually necessarily the focal point for the buyers. So I wonder, do you think this is going to have a long-term shift?
I think the whole business is kind of dictated unfortunately, because we are in an industry which is time sensitive, like you put a collection out and it has to sell before the spring-summer collection. At one point, it's going to go on sale. And we're working back from there now. Like it's dictated from the retailer and a sale. And I don't know how we got to this point, but this is where we are. And now all of our businesses are coming back from there. Like, okay, then if this is when the sale happens, how can I get my product? And we all have to worry about making sure we have an incredible image and we're doing something new and exciting and we're setting trends. But ultimately, we're still all there with this horrible dictated time bomb, which we're all running against. And I think that people are starting to realise that. And of course, it's not the same, that's a ready-to-wear business. If you've got accessories, it's a little easier because they're not as, you know, seasonal. Yeah, but when you're making an incredible collection, you see these runway shows with, I don't know, 80 looks that are all amazing, and they've spent millions, and literally millions, on creating all these beautiful garments. They're almost thrown away at the end of the season because you're doing another one for the pre-collection, when you're doing another, you know, 300 designs and patterns, and, you know, so it's very, it's a tough business because of this time. But most of these big companies, they are accessory-led.
Yeah.
And so they have that slight advantage that...
What's your take on it, Mimma? You were kind of, you sort of pulled the face when we were talking about the cost of it, because these cruise shows, the amount of money being spent on
But I have a sort of an answer which is also a question, because actually, and correct me if I'm wrong, when cruise started, or the pre-collection started, they were more commercial.
Yeah.
So they were selling more but now, these people design stuff for those incredible shows that are exactly like the normal fashion shows. So I don't understand. I mean, for me, it's completely a communication thing. And I also think, and that's what bothers me a little bit, that when they started doing these big shows, I think Chanel started these big shows out of, you know, the normal calendar, out of the normal places where people were flown first class and blah, blah, blah. We know what happens was to distance themselves from the masses because it's so big. And now all the big ones are doing it, so someone will probably find a different way. So I think today, more than because that's what actually sells, it's to be different. Because it's catwalk collections, it's complicated, not always commercial. So why would it sell more than the spring summer?
Because it's delivered earlier.
It's going to be delivered, and it's going to be delivered earlier. So you're there on the shop floor for 5 months.
Store for so much longer.
I mean,
But no, it doesn't sit that much longer, because then the collection kicks in and it goes.
Well, if you do a show in Fashion Week in March, and it's a full winter show.
Yeah,
and
so it comes in August, September.
August, September, on the complexity of each garment. So you're delivering in September. You're going on sale in the USA in November.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're going on sale in November. And for 3 to 4 weeks before that sale, nobody's going to buy full price because they know in 4 weeks it's going to be half price. Why do I need to spend
I think the customers are a lot more
so
savvy
cruise
now.
is in January and you're delivering it in June.
Yeah.
You have all that
it's
time.
very
No one's
normal for a
waiting.
customer to go into the shop now in November and say, have you got pre-collection? And it's a normal conversation. It's normal vocab now. And it's normal for the sales associates to actually know what you're talking about. If you are one of these people that goes and says, have you got the pre-collection? You know, Chanel have just dropped their in store. And again, you know, they've got customers waiting. They're teasing people because it's on the website. But suddenly you've got to wait another week. So there's a lot of teasing going on, but also I think it's all about meaningful product. So there's a reason to, you know, it's about drops now. It's not about, oh, I'm going into Dover Street twice a season to see the Comme des Garçons and I won't go any other time. There's all these capsules and all sorts, any excuse for product. And customers are loving it. Customers need it. And the industry needs it.
And if
you know, Christopher Shannon wasn't even going to bother with a menswear presentation this men's fashion week in London, but he decided to do it as a foil to his fragrance Sovereign's launch. And actually, he's not even calling it his new collection, he's calling it a capsule. And again, it's a meaning, if you look at it, his customers are going to love it. I mean, it's going to do really, really well. But why not? You know, it's meaningful retail product that will sell.
But all of that doesn't have anything to do with the way the money is spent around to present it. I think that's more of a communication
I think it
thing,
slightly does. It's the sense of doing constant communication. So something
in constant dropping.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
need content. We need content all the time. And if you think about the e-commerce business, which is also, you know, obviously growing and probably the most healthiest, we see the bricks and mortar suffering. That if you can go into a store 4 times in a season, you can go online every day and see what's just new and what's been delivered. And people do, and they need content. They need.
But there's a lot of subliminal stuff going on as well with the maisons, with their websites. They're all kind of dropping products without any reason early, and it's almost like the customer, you know, has to keep on their toes and keep peeping, or else if they blink, they're going to miss this bag that they wanted. And it's almost like, how could they do that without letting us know? But it's almost like part of the frenzy, the kind of subtle frenzy, if I can say, you know.
I think also there's that interesting thing which you know, whenever I speak to the representatives from e-retailers when we're out at the shows and sort of get the scoop on how the business is going, they always say that if you can put, you know, runway look, that label on a product, it just does so much better. So I think that's another thing with the cruise, is it just generates more catwalk imagery that e-retailers can then use, and it makes a product seem more desirable that it was on a runway. Exactly. Whereas something that has been just shot for a lookbook or just made as a commercial collection doesn't have that veneer of, you know, I think every brand is trying to differentiate why their product has the price point it has, and you know, if it's been shot on a big girl on a runway looking great, it just gives that veneer.
I think doing these big showcases all over, you know, getting the whole of the fashion circus over to Brazil, and everyone's taking the requisite tourist photo in front of the statue, what have you. It's just, I don't know, I think it backfires a little bit. There's so much going on in the world. It's a terrible climate, and you're splashing all this money. It just doesn't sit well for some people. You know, I think it's almost like, you know, at some point they're going to run out of where is the next, you know.
Well, the whole thing
Bubble
isn't a
palace
sustainable
in
attitude.
town.
That many clothes, that many shows, you know, it's not.
That much money.
It's a little bit gratuitous, you know. I think that what Gosh is doing is quite interesting, you know, because it's re-educating people on that an area that we knew very little about.
He can do it. He can do because it's authentic for him to do.
Yes, but he does interestingly, he does 4 drops in a season.
But it still
But Chris
drives people to
Gibbs from
something
Union, that store in LA, very influential store, was saying that he can only buy 3 drops because by the 4th he has his sale. So it doesn't work for him, but it's how people work around that.
I think it is that sense of, you know, he can do it, as you said, because he's from there, and you know, taking these crowds out to Russia for these shows, it makes sense for him. But also, he does have the support of Comme des Garçons behind him, so I think that also allows for it. You know, it's much harder. You know, there's so many people on the London schedule who are from really interesting places and quite different places, but you know, just wouldn't have the means or the money to fly everyone out. Like, I'm sure Marcus Almeida would love to do like amazing show and educate everyone about Portuguese culture, but it's just not something that they perhaps. So I think that's also the smoke and mirrors of it. Where do you stand on all of this because we've all said that part of the thirst to do this is sort of content, and where do you stand from it from a digital strategy perspective? Because obviously these shows are kind of like they live and die online in terms of number of views, and that's another big purpose, is to have more content and engage more people through live streams or Instagrams or what have you.
Yeah, and I think the fact that some of the more recent ones haven't been having the same amount of impressions and things like that is a nod to what you said. As more people keep on doing that and jumping on that message, then that needs another disruption to kind of happen again. I think it's interesting that if you look at the original kind of purpose of Cruise, it was actually developed like for customers. It was for them who were going on holiday at different times of year. And I think people now who are choosing to do that, some of it's for financial reasons because of the way that the system is and getting commercial product in the right place at the right time. But I think many brands, again, aren't thinking of what the end customer like actually wants. And I think you raised that point right at the very beginning. Yes, I think there are like the the core kind of fashion customers who know very well, and I don't know if it's also part of this discussion, the kind of wear now, buy now that has kind of gone like that a little bit. But the customers actually don't seem to mind waiting for product, and I think the current kind of complexity in the shows is going to get worse before it gets better. I think there's a lot of confusion. PR or kind of journalists won't write about things at certain times. I've heard from people who are kind of showing collections because they don't know where to put it or what order to put it on pages and stuff.
Totally.
But yeah, that continual thirst for content continues. What I would really love to see from a kind of digital perspective is more people showing collections and then having end customers and stakeholders as well in the industry decide what should get actually manufactured. So there's a...
Well, Topshop Unique did a really interesting thing. It was quite a while ago. It was maybe about 2 years ago, maybe even 3 or 4 years ago. They did a thing which was basically that, but they masked it in a different way, which is that you could like things and change the color of them as they came down the runway, which was basically, I took as a way for them to collect data on, what people were engaging with the most, what people liked the most, the colors they turned it into, which I thought was very interesting, particularly for a brand like Topshop with their Unique collection where, it is still a mass market thing and they want...
Does the customer know what they want?
Well, that's another thing, and maybe you like a picture of it in that
You
colour.
you like something 1 week, and then
but do they still do it? Probably it didn't
months
work
later?
if they stopped doing it, because it sounds like a good idea, but are they still
It sounds
doing
like Nike ID. I mean, it sounds a bit
No, I
mainstream.
think it sounds like a good idea for that kind of market, but then if they stop doing it, it's probably because you're right.
But I think there's also
People
that,
just because they can do it, they say whatever.
yeah, there's that difficult thing of something that does well digitally. Does that also mean it would translate to sales? And it's interesting to get because you always see it with like each show has like a standout look from the show that is the one that gets Instagrammed the most. And often it's not necessarily actually because of the garments. It might be because the
combination,
the girl that was wearing it, or the way it was styled exactly, or where it was placed in the show. It was the final look, so more journalists took a picture of it. And
Or the brand, I think that some of the results that we've seen on hits for those very expensive shows, they tell me that the brand is not hot at the moment, or it is, the brand is not cool, or it is, because you can do a big thing, but if you only have 17,000 hit for that, it means that maybe the brand has a problem.
When Louis Vuitton did that boombox in the cruise show, everyone was trying to Instagram that, but there was no decent picture. None of the press got any decent pictures.
Yeah. So that's
So,
why
I mean, I spent hours trying to find these images. I found them and I was going, which is the better? Should I make it bigger? Should I make it? And I thought, no, it just looks awful. And it's almost like, how can little things like that, doesn't a brand need to almost like try and help? Because then later in the season, you have this other wave where the press have gone into the showroom for a press day, and finally you see a great image of it. It's weird.
Yeah.
I do think there's an interesting thing though. There's like some shows you go to where you're almost like, do they not want us to be able to take pictures? Which they maybe don't. Maybe they want to control, what they drip feed out,
Like, please take pictures of look number 4. Look number 4 has a really big margin. It looks great. I can sell lots of them. Don't take pictures of look number 8. I don't think I can make
Didn't
it.
you see the earring in the right earlobe of look number 8 as well?
Didn't someone just do a show and say no pictures allowed? Who was that?
Tom
Ford.
Tom Ford did that a lot.
He was doing that when he first came. Yeah, when he first
It is quite common to do that, and even Hood by Air, a very different kind of brand to Tom Ford. They did a presentation a few seasons ago in Paris where they put like a sticker over your phone on your camera when you went in. So I do think there's an interest, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not engaging with digital. It sometimes means that they want to control the type of pictures that go out.
But people have also suggested that kind of fast marketing to fast fashion is what's driving the need for fewer drops and capsule collections as well, haven't they? Fewer, but more frequent.
Yeah.
And more controlled, as Lou said. Yeah.
What's your take? As Trino mentioned earlier, which is very, very true and has been sort of publicised quite widely in lots of the think pieces and comment pieces about Prada's sort of semi-difficulties that they're having at the moment in terms of their business. And she mentioned that they came late to digital, which is very much the case. Notoriously very sceptical of e-commerce, don't have a particularly sort of innovative digital strategy in the way like one of their peers such as Gucci does. What do you make of the way that they've approached digital? They are now doing e-com, like you can buy Prada on Mr. Porter matches and what have you.
I think a lot of the activities they've done this year have been a knee-jerk reaction to those kind of profit drop warnings that were in January and March. And they have to be seen to try and to do things, and in some ways it's a good thing, because I think that's what Prada were always known for being experimental. And I think they've had a bit of like a poke to start that kind of up again.
I also think that brands have it in their characters or not. And honestly, I don't blame Miuccia for resisting it. I mean, she shouldn't for business reasons, but I don't see Prada being a brand that engages
but do you know what though? She has,
snobbish
but
brand.
she doesn't have satellite product. You know, like she has she does have great bags, but they get lost because she doesn't do the focus on the product like Gucci do. So Gucci, if you're on their email like every other day, there's some big shoe that's launched, and even though I'm not really that bothered, I still have a peep.
Yeah, exactly.
Where you've got to remember, digital is talking directly to your customer, and I agree. I think we had this conversation when we spoke about the digital kind of the strategy of Prada. I don't blame them either. Their whole history has always been much about just working with art or much more about, but actually you're then refusing to connect with your customer. Your customer is now online digital.
Oh, I agree with you, so I do blame them, but I see where it comes from. And if you heard her interview after the cruise, she said, oh, it's not cruise, you know, it's just a show, so she doesn't want to engage with this.
We can ponder these themes as we watch the show.
Yes.
One of my favourite things about going to a Prada show is always the way they change. It's always in the same place, which you wouldn't know if you just watched I think if you were just a big Prada fan who followed the live streams, you would think it was a totally different location. It's not, they just kind of completely change the interiors, and it's always really, really fantastic.
It's the architects that do the space.
Yeah, so it's Rem Koolhaas at OAM who do it, and the last women's was particularly interesting because it almost looked a little bit somewhere between a sort of teenage bedroom and sort of fly pasted posters in the streets, and it was very much looking at women's role in society, and sort of it was a feminist statement, which obviously harked back slightly to sort of Miuccia's own background because she worked within the Communist Party and what have you.
Look, the people are sunk in.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
No footwear on show.
It's quite something for Prada. I mean,
what are you saying?
I don't know, that red look was very aggressive for Prada.
But they had a look in the women's show. It was like Lindsay Wixom wore it, and it was this like very, very sexy red cocktail dress.
Yeah.
And it kind of was a bit of an anomaly within the show, and it really, like that was one of those ones where it just got Instagrammed everywhere.
Not sure they should be doing red soles.
That's like classic Prada though, doing like the rubber bit around the shoe. I agree, the red has a slightly strange cut, but
I wonder how the Instagrams will come across, because the audience are quite far from the models.
yeah.
And you do want that winning shot, don't you, when you're watching?
I can't also work out, is that light that's making that on the floor, or is that paint?
No, it's paint.
It's paint.
It's very interesting. I don't even know if I would say it's Prada if I didn't know it is.
Really, I think it's so classically
Do you think
Prada,
so?
like all of the sort of those colours, the browns, the nylon-y fabrics, those like classic Prada sports shoes. What do you think of the way they do their live stream, like having that?
That was weird.
It's weird. It's so like, it's like an appetite, like the fact that they do a slow-mo of the product.
The detail, live detail.
But then it's almost like you watch it and it should feel like you can click on everything and buy it immediately if they're doing it like that, you know.
But they're very glossy. I mean, Prada's always been really glossy. And
they're missing a lot of outfits in this stream.
But then it's really weird to have like such a techie digital strategy when it comes to how you stream your show if you don't have the e-commerce business to back it. You know, this makes sense for me for something like Gucci, where it's like, you know, it would, or Burberry, where it would drive you through to like a million similar products.
Everybody's watching it online, done exactly in this way.
I like it when she goes a bit sort of like spacey, uniformy, workers' uniform. I always find it really interesting.
I don't think it's as refined as Prada usually is. I think it's going a little bit...
It's quite sporty.
It's like it's sporty,
It's more Prada sport than Prada.
That's a lot where the industry's going as well, though. Yeah. I mean, tailoring is very slow, I think, for everybody right now, and
it's a bit, to me, it's a bit stuff that, like, that last printed top that we saw, that reminds me of, like, the golf collection. I feel like it's a bit of a kind of greatest hitsy type collection, you know, things that you know her for within the menswear.
Can we turn the music up a teeny bit?
It's just very commercial as a collection, though, isn't it?
Which is what they need.
Yeah, it's exactly what they need.
It's quite the trend of the season, I think.
What, doing
Wearable
very,
and commercial.
well, look, everybody's feeling a little bit tense right now about what's happening with the industry, why people have lost interest in, why have people lost interest in shopping? And they really have. You know, I've got friends of mine who would shop constantly for designer clothes, and they just don't feel like shopping right now.
What do you think that is? Do you think it's the wider spirit of the times, that it just feels kind of a bit naff to be spending that much money on clothes?
It's late in the season, we're about to go into sale, Trino.
You would never lose your thirst for
Did you
shopping.
see Jonathan Heath's piece in the Sunday Times Style today?
No, I haven't read it yet. I've got it at
It's
home.
all about his off-duty dad looks.
Yeah.
And I thought it was quite interesting
Really?
because, you know, it's like, am I really going to put on my Christopher Kane skirt to let the Deliveroo guy in? You know, it's like, how do people really dress
I
when
think
they're
it's
not
that casual thing, isn't
when
it?
they're not going to a thing?
Also, it's a few years since, like, I think when the London men's show started, there was this peak moment of like, men love fashion, men can dress really fashionably, and I think that's slightly subsided now, and people are a bit more like, can I be bothered to make that much effort all the time, and a bit of a reversal of that sort of.
And it felt weird not having Jonathan Anderson here either.
Yeah,
That left a big hole, I think.
But even Jonathan Anderson's collection was a similar kind of
Back to
vibe this.
basics.
It was like basics.
Yeah.
You know, it was like what he wears, like navy tops, jeans.
And these collaborations as well, you know, like he was Converse, and then you had Kotweiler with Reebok. I think wasn't Gosha was second Adidas,
Yeah.
and Kiko was Kostadinov was Asics, I think.
But then that's interesting again because it goes back to what we were talking about before, which is like designer brands almost operate like that fast fashion thing. Like if you're putting your name on a fast fashion product, how do you justify the price of your product that you're actually selling? It's almost like they're operating more like design studios where they'll make bits and bobs and put their name on things for people and work on commission rather than having their own I just find that really interesting. I want to see some of the prints up. I guess we can have a look at images. Sorry.
I think Martine Rose was supported by Nike again as well, wasn't she?
Yeah, Martine Rose's collection was great.
Yeah.
But then I think you see, obviously Martine Rose does the Balenciaga, well, she works on the Balenciaga men's, and I think you're seeing that influence of her look, even on things like this, which is that sense of it's somewhere between workwear and sportswear. It's got that sort of lots of not so much kind of traditional menswear, things like ties and suits and what have you, but then with these very sporty things, and that's exactly, I mean, now it's going a bit
weird.
That's
the
But
word
that's
to
what I
use.
liked about Kotweiler. That's what I liked about Kotweiler because it was all about the RV, which is recreational vehicle. Well, actually, what you wear recreationally, apart from Jonathan Heath, you wear in your job, in your work, and I think it's probably a sign of success for people not to get totally dressed up for a meeting.
I think also just like, as you know, as we're watching a men's show, it is that thing of like, how men dress when they go to work now. It's like they don't wear suits anymore, so catering to that guy.
Or they wear suits like this.
What's really interesting, there's not been any women in this, and she always puts women in her men's look. In her men's show, sometimes
because of the other show, the recent show. Yeah.
she brought. But I thought she'd still put them in because
and
she's
you know
never
what?
fully stuck to that.
It's a foil. As a foil, it's a great.
I think her suits.
But would they
the
sit
best
together
part
so
of it.
well?
But they've never, what's weird is some of her men's shows, it's literally had almost the same amount of women in them, and then she started calling it the men's and women's show, and there was often a vague criticism that women's wear would overshadow the men's because it tends to be much more opulent. And I was really intrigued to see whether she would still put a few women's wear exits within this. Just
don't know
because
yet.
I know, maybe she'll do them, maybe she'll close
I think
them.
it's almost over.
But I think it counted all the looks.
It's the end, I think, so.
I think this will please a lot of the men's press, though, that this is now just a menswear show again.
I want one of the jumpsuits.
I
So
do
I wish
think the
there would be
jumpsuits are
women
quite
in them
good.
as
The
well.
jumpsuits are great.
Yeah.
I just hate that flap.
I know, well, that whole asymmetric thing as well, because Christopher Shannon did that. Gosh did that, you know, where there's one colour on one side.
I like some of the colours and the tones, and they
Colours
almost
are
look a little bit like malfunctioning computers sort of stuff. It's interesting. But she's such a great colorist, I always think. Like these bad tones that
Powder
like, just
blue
work
with
really well.
the burgundy was fantastic. But those shirt colors are, for me, unbearable.
But it's a bit like retro working guy, isn't it? You know, like I kind of like
Apart
it.
from that look.
Have you seen that weird little island in the middle of the seating? I wonder if Alex is sat there.
They always do that where they put some press in. They did that at one show that I was at where there were like 6 of us in this kind of strange orchestra pit in the middle of it.
Yeah, there.
It's quite fun. And then they had that at the last show. Some of the press was sat on beds, so others around
yeah.
the edge. I mean, it's an amazing show to go to, and also
No,
like,
but that bed thing was great because
It was
before the
amazing.
show started, there was Instagrammable elements
It's
like that.
everywhere. I do think it's a brilliant show, but then I think part of the skill of Prada will need to be translating that, because going to the show is so immersive. Like even like the food that they give you when you go in, it's always kind of slightly strange and often seems to fit with the tempo of the show. But then you go onto their Instagram or you go into the store particularly, and it doesn't feel like that sort of immersive
Is that
energy
denim?
has translated.
Was that denim, that last look?
I never been to one of our men's shows, but the women's shows are always.
Do you know what I mean? You feel like you're in this
the
strange
moment of the
world,
season, yeah.
and then
But I do you really think this is brilliant? I'm not sure.
I also find it really funny because did you guys read all that stuff about the male rompers? That was like a trend. You know, they were like everywhere. And now I can see like the Daily Mail doing a piece about this, being like, Prada says the male romper
It's
is
all
in.
okay again.
Yeah.
I quite like it.
I quite like the boiler suits. I think
I
they're
like when
good.
she does like a boringy type, you know, like all these kind of ordinary, strange, like worky wear stuff. I kind of prefer that to when she goes super opulent. What do you think of it from a business perspective, like looking at with your business brain on and knowing, you know, the sort of what categories you need to push within a collection? How are you seeing it, Trino?
I always look at shows and just think they could have anything behind this.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, that's the vision for the season. I would imagine that Prada's money is made from selling navy jumpers, shoes, you know, nothing wrong with that. You know, a show is there to make sure that you're still relevant, but your product is very much, why do you go to
Prada.
Why'd you go to Prada? Because you know you're going to get a really well-fitting suit. You're going to get a really great shirt with a print on it. I bet you that she's got a load of great printed shirts, like she always
I think
has.
the prints are like a pop art thing,
Yeah.
maybe, because they did these teasers, which we can have a look at in a minute, so that would make sense.
Did you see print in this? Because there was the bunny print in the women's.
Yeah. Well, they've done, lots of the shirts have prints, and they've done these panels of prints as well, which we can have a look when we get the images in.
I think Prada knows exactly what they're doing when it comes to product. They'll be completely covered. They'll be merchandised within an inch of its life. It's just now whether people think that Prada's relevant or not, just because people are interested in new designers right now, and they're interested in somebody doing something a bit more provocative, and somebody has to go down if somebody else is going to go up.
No, that makes
I think that's a really good point because, you know, Grace Wells-Bonner, you know, she went on her travels with Harley Weir and went to Pretoria to do her film. I think it's called Practice, and we mentioned this earlier on, that she's going to release the film when the product arrives in the stores, but it's a lovely marketing narrative to her brand, and she's a young brand and she can do that.
I do think that's an interesting thing that you mentioned, though. Sometimes it is hard when you're a brand that big to do. You know, Grace, if she does a film, it's easier.
And it's
in a way as a young
authentic,
brand.
it's
Yeah,
very real.
You've got more flexibility and more movement almost.
But also, I think it's interesting that Kodak supported it as well, because, you know, are Kodak going to sponsor a show? I don't know. But Kodak are beside themselves that they supported this film for her. They're really, really happy that they've helped her realise her creative. Nothing more than that.
Prada's been doing fashion films for years,
Yeah.
so they can do it too.
No, I just mean that when you're a bigger brand, you have so many different channels. Like they do these films for the perfumes, which are great, and then she looks fabulous.
Yeah.
I love her.
Yeah, me
She's
too.
so chic.
But you
they-
know,
yeah,
it's
so
like-
they have to cover so many different channels. So it's harder to do one thing that has impact because there's so many different things that you have to
Yeah.
do. You know, like Grace.
That's I think the problem. You know, the fact that you have to do, as Trino was saying before. You know, I understand where Miuccia comes from, but then that happened, and it's not her cup of tea. She wants to do architectures, films, incredible fashion.
But then who are we kidding?
And it's very
the designer themselves would be the one coming up with the digital strategy. Like she just needs to hire a load of like brilliant digital minds who will do that for her and make it feel Prada.
Make it feel right.
Every
for Prada.
brand is struggling with finding
Exactly.
those people.
Yeah.
It's a very easy thing
Maybe
to
nobody
do.
has really found out how to do it correctly.
No, I think totally.
You can say that better.
Yeah, no, I mean, all the brands that I speak to, if they have one kind of ambassador within inside the brand, they need more than that. They need a collective of people, because otherwise they don't last that long in the brand, because no one listens to them long enough.
Who's getting their digital strategy right in terms of the big brands, do you think?
Balmain,
Yeah.
Gucci.
Gucci's is really
Gucci.
interesting.
Theirs is probably the most fully integrated that I was using
So
the lectures and
So
stuff.
Studio. We were talking about it earlier.
Can we have a look at those little videos that they were doing? Do you still have them, Angie? So they did these little teasery type Liechtenstein-esque videos, God, I can't even speak, which
These
I
are so
think is like a
Prada.
preview of the print, which is so Prada. But this is what I mean. It's like they do. I think when you're a big brand, it's so much harder to do something like this that has impact. You know, because it's like there's this rush for content that people could just miss stuff. You know, and like.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because they're also, they can do anything? Do you think they're just afraid about making a mistake? I always feel that about Prada. Prada's always
They're shackled by their own
Yeah.
good taste.
Yeah, they have the limitations that they put around themselves. A young designer would have an idea to do something digital like this, but would make it, I don't know, really funny at the end, or make it a little bit off at the end. Whereas it's slick. It's always slick with Prada, and that's great because that's them. But you know, right now, I think that if a young designer was to do this, or they'd get a graphic artist in, they'd have something really funny at the end.
But
of it.
that's the problem. Immediacy. She doesn't do immediacy. She does.
Yeah, but in Miu Miu we have that though, don't we?
Yeah,
Like Miranda Julie films, and that's a bit more on the vibe.
I think there's also a problem, which is Prada is a brand that has always been one, and I think it's part of their strength and why there's this cult around her as such an intellectual designer, is Prada is one that informs people and it sets a pace and people follow it. Whereas currently, I think the climate of shopping and the climate that people enjoy engaging with in a digital sphere is one of interaction and the sense that you are involved and you can talk to the brand and they listen. And a lot of Gucci's digital strategy plays on that, like when they did the meme campaign for the watches.
Absolutely.
Whereas that isn't on brand for Prada to do something that feels Prada, it is very much like Prada sets the taste. It's kind of similar to a Celine thing. Like Celine, it's much harder for them to do anything with humour or anything that is about.
Incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem in a sense because it's just this. And maybe that will change, and people will go back to a thirst for having. For things being for things being dictated and things being less about this sort of back and forth dialogue. But I just think at the moment, it's perhaps not the pace of the times necessarily.
But I think there's also a disjoint with Prada in that the stuff that really makes them money, the kind of bread and butter, I suppose it is for many brands, is the kind of the traditional suit that many of the people and certainly the men in Europe wear. And it goes back to what we said earlier about, and the reason why people are having to do resort collections is to make sure that they have more product which is closer to market, which is more commercial.
Well, a lot of people say that a part of just within the fashion press, that a problem for Prada has also been a failure. Whether they've made it or not, it's how they publicise it to do like a hit accessory. Like, you know, with Gucci, with like the shoes and the bags, it's like, I think all of us could name or talk about lots of key accessories that they've done. Whereas I think with Prada, there hasn't been that same sort of cult bag or shoe. And I think that's maybe a bit of a problem. Like when you look at brands that have been really successful commercially, so like something like Saint Laurent or Gucci, it was like bits and bobs, you know,
I
like
think
those
Prada
Rockstar
did do that a
shoes.
year ago with their pre-collection, when they did the bunny graphic, and they did the beautiful snake coats with the bunnies on it.
But it was kind
that
of
was a
one
real heavy-hitting,
You need something like
hardcore.
every week almost.
You know,
what I mean?
they probably have it more than you actually see.
Exactly, that's what I
Because
mean,
The
it's
point
how
is
it's
that, like I think
They're not communicating it.
about 2 seasons ago, that the crossbody, short crossbody bag has launched the trend of the smaller, short crossbody bag. I'm sorry, Miuccia started it. And that bag is fantastic, but then they don't do a special Instagram or a special collaboration with a Coco Capitan to do it, you know what I mean? So they do have it, you just
I think it's how it's
communicated.
I think they do have it. They really do have it.
I think it's how it's communicated. It is totally how it's communicated. And the ability to turn it into a cult and remind people constantly that it's there.
Exactly.
Because people are getting their information on their screens. They're not going into the stores in the same way.
No, and when they go to the stores, they come with a picture on their screen and say, I want that.
Yeah.
You know, you don't go to the store for
But
that
I know because I
information.
still go to the stores
Right.
to see collections.
Keep an eye on the merchandise.
I can send you emails.
But you say yourself, if you go to a store, it doesn't look like a runway. I would imagine that we're going to go to a Prada menswear store in 5 months and you are not going to see all these boiler suits. We're going to see all their best-selling pieces that are in there because that's their business, you know. And the boiler suits, they'll be like maybe 3.
But that's also what's interesting to contrast to the Gucci model, where it's like everything on the runway there goes into store.
It does.
And I think that, again, feels more modern because that sense of the customer doesn't feel like they're being sort of like hoodwinked. You know, it's like they see something and then they can get something, and there's not that disconnect.
He's
And
extremely
because they do that,
got news
they're
for
not
you.
actually bothered about having the runway. Because there's that transparency. When the customer makes that decision what they are going to pick, that's not so, they wouldn't be as bothered as they normally would be.
But I went to Prada the other day and the winter collection is almost completely in stores. So I don't know if they start...
The runway.
The runway was there. I was surprised to say, oh, it really looks like their last show. I mean, not everything, and also there's some stuff that it's... But a lot of it, and there were not that many blue jumpers. And
Was the store busy when you were there?
it was quite busy, yeah. There were 2 Russian women with all the staff.
They've
around.
got
It was the
amazing
Bond
staff.
Street one.
They have
And they
amazing
were
staff in
being
that
taken
store.
care as usual client. I think they were buying, you know...
But it's like you go into a Gucci store and it's like being in Zara. Like there's
it's not.
like,
It
you
wasn't
see,
like
the
that.
staff are amazing. Like it's
No, it
obviously
wasn't like
the
that.
customer service, but it's like you have to wait to get because there's like the amount of people. Whereas you could like fire a cannonball through a Prada show
That's why
and not hurt
Gucci is
anyone. Like,
growing 24% and Prada is not growing 24%.
but then that's the problem. It's that if they don't have that thirst to go to the stores, then and they also don't have the online.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's a shame because Prada is the one, I think, in terms of aesthetics, that is far more influential than anything else and sets the pace consistently. And like any designer talks about worshipping Prada, but it shows how marketing is so important at the moment, that the brands who are maybe performing the best are the ones who have the innovative marketing strategy rather than innovative design strategy necessarily.
You have to have everything now. You have to have it all.
Yeah.
You can't be at 90% in any part of the business. Your product's got to be great, your marketing's got to be great, your deliveries have got to be great.
What was the turning point where that really started, where it was all about like marketing and sort of content and brands having to almost be publishers? When did that begin?
Well, if marketing is directly to the customer,
Yeah.
it's when you could actually, I mean, to go back to what we first started to talk about, which is these great big events that the big luxury brands are doing. They are marketing events rather than PR events, because they're actually taking their top clients. They're giving those top clients an experience. But how many clients can you take to one of these events? 100, 150? They're probably making up 30% of their retail stores turnover, because the very, very top clients.
Not more than that?
More, yeah.
Probably
I think
even
more.
more.
I think more.
Because it costs them a lot of money to
No,
fly
you had
them,
clients, very, very often you'll have like 10% of clients making 80% of your
the
sales.
business, yeah.
It's insane. What if
Yeah.
one of them
So-
like changes their mind or like loses their
that's the
money?
problem.
That's dangerous.
That's called
That's
clienteling. That's
Yeah,
why
but
we
I
spend
think
a
you're
lot of
talking
money
about
with
you're
good
talking
stuff.
about collection though, whereas what you were talking about before about the shoes, the accessories.
Well, that's because that's digital. What I'm saying is, if you go back to what marketing is, it's not with press where they're talking in magazines, it's talking to the customer. And now your top customer is buying the runway pieces and you're flying them over to 2 different countries a year and you're treating them for dinners and they're getting an amazing brand loyalty. But the other millions of people that you have to reach, you're not flying them around, you've got to reach them through digital.
And they have trunk shows in the stores as well. Louis Vuitton are very good at that.
Yeah. But it is brands, I think, who can make everyone feel important that are the ones that people are engaging with at the moment. Like there's something for everyone.
In answer to your question, I think it was the early 2000s where social media and kind of the tricklings of e-commerce, because it was a new channel for customers to interact directly with brands. So they instantly had another choice, and there was a lot more kind of unraveling of.
Well, Mandi said earlier, which I think is a really good point, which is just that customers are so much better informed. And do you think that has also had an effect, is that people just know so much more and they're much more savvy and much less likely to need advice necessarily from someone?
Yeah, I mean, there's a counter argument for both, because like you said, customers don't always know what they want. And increasingly, if you look at some of the emerging business models, it's about having a certain uniform or buying 12 pieces, and letting other people choose those pieces for you. But more than ever.
Is that apathy? Is that just the fact that people are overwhelmed by choice rather than necessarily need advice? It's more that they just can't be bothered to go through like 20 pages of...
No, I think it's a business model for the future, because I think there's more and more customers that are being like that, and men and women.
I think that communication and marketing has been important always. I mean, if Gucci and Louis Vuitton are Gucci and Louis Vuitton today, it's because marketing and communication were important 50 years ago. I think what has changed is the digital era has made things much more grassroots, so bottom up and not dictating down, because of the accessibility of the information and the fact that the people out there can give advice, can also fill the internet with things that are not real, but people believe. So I just think that what has really changed, and hence the need of content, is the pace, is the timing, because it used to be 2 campaigns a year, and and now it's the speed. But communication has made the big brands what they are today.
I think also,
Even before
they go to
telephone
websites
existed.
like High Snobiety and Hypebeast.
Sorry,
I think
what did you say?
Hypebeast and High Snobiety. You know, I go on High Snobiety about 20 times a day, and I think these brands are getting very savvy that that's the customer. It's the millennial who's actually starting to have the income to buy these luxury brands. And also these are a customer base that are brought up on product drops. They're brought up on like Supreme, and they're used to all these special historic collaborations. You know, they get it when Colette collaborate with a brand. It's not just a collaboration for the sake of it. It's actually going to be a limited edition product, and that customer is very, very keen to know about exclusive product, but exclusive product that keeps coming through.
Yeah, well, that's their idea of why
and a
something
narrative to go with
But
it.
you see it in films and TV series. I mean, when there is a joke about a product, it's like the name of the trainer and the name of the only retailer in the world that sell it. I don't know if you noticed, but everything then it's like, it's used. Yeah. And those are product placements. I'm sorry.
I think it's just that sense of that's what value is now. It's that how difficult it is to get it, or how few people have it, much more than what it's actually made from.
Yeah, but the Jeff Koons with Louis Vuitton is a very good example. It's not something that I was particularly bothered about, but you couldn't escape from it. It was a brilliant campaign. The way it launched, the way it came everywhere, the way it came and then it went, and then suddenly you found yourself thinking, oh my God, do I need a handbag with Mona Lisa on it?
The problem there is the product to me, but that's just me probably.
Do we think that this collection has enough of that sort of pull in terms of product and that sense of something that feels very timely and with the pace? I mean, I do think like the boiler seats are an interesting addition.
But I don't see a reinvention of something as we used to in Miuccia. So I've seen a lot of short sleeve shirts in this season, and that's something I hate.
Why do you hate
even Miuccia? I think it's the
makes people look like a
most
man.
elegant and good-looking thing in the world. But that's very subjective, so nobody cares. But I see Miuccia does it too. And is anybody
that's quite a Prada piece, or printed short sleeve shirt. Like I think
of Prada as a printed.
Yes, but short sleeves.
This silhouette,
rolls up sleeves, yes.
It feels very, that silhouette's very Prada to me, that shirt, with like the almost sporty kind of trousers, not...
And she experimented a couple of months ago with kind of like mass customization of the printed shirts as well, which I thought that was like an interesting business model.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah,
they created a capsule collection of printed shirts, and then people could kind of customize certain parts of them, and then they would get delivered, I think, within 8 weeks.
Really?
Yeah.
At Prada? Was that all over online? I missed it.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know about that.
And then, well, remember they did the customized shoes a while back too.
There was a pair of sandals there that I think it's going to be the hit.
But the one
It
that
was very good
the one
with
that had the
socks.
split screen, they brought up deliberately.
Exactly.
Did you all see the
Back to
shoes?
collection.
Exactly. And the belts.
I think the prints all just do well either. I think that's the thing, is it's that model. But
Pieces, it's kind of what you go to Prada for. I mean, I think we all know a couple of men who will buy, you know, these, they'll put it in with their wardrobe, something fun and irrelevant. And what you're missing is probably the stories behind it, because they haven't, and that's what they can do through the digital world, is what's the print mean? Where's it coming from? Where's the idea from? Which artist created it?
Talking about like multiple drops, the thing is, if you look at like a Gucci collection, there's about like 10 different key prints within that collection. And I think that's that thing with Prada, it's almost so elevated. There's like the one key print of that season, but almost it's like we're in the climes at the moment where you need to have like 8 prints that all seem really cool and relevant.
There's nothing better than going onto an e-commerce site and saying only one left, and you're like, I would just buy it, you know.
Need to buy it now, yeah.
But I think Prada as well.
Look at that. Look at that sneaker with.
You carry on.
I was just going to say, Prada always kind of assume a level of intelligence of their customer, which I think is why they've had a bit of a kind of quieter approach, which I think has been slightly detrimental.
Yeah.
But do you think in the long term that might actually
hope
come
it
back?
does, yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting.
I think that at the end of the day, you can't go out too much from who you are, because then people don't understand. You know, Miuccia Prada is there, and she can't reinvent everything unless someone's take over.
I think you can when your brand is strong, because the elasticity of it, you can kind of go.
Times
With a
change.
new designer. I mean, Gucci could do it, but with a new designer, not with Mr. Gucci is still there after 100 years. I think. It's hard to do it with the same.
But I do think that times change. That's like saying that Prada used to do only still life images, and then they got into film because film became available. Digital becomes available. I'm just surprised that they're a little bit slow on doing it their way, and I understand.
They haven't found a way to do it.
They haven't found a way to do it.
I think
That's
she's
it.
resisting, and you know,
Of course.
she's 70. I mean, don't forget, she's not.
I don't have an interest in doing digital myself either, but I'm not a brand. I'm not sitting there saying, why is nobody looking at my Instagram? Why is nobody buying my product?
Yeah, I understand.
You're sitting on the side.
Virgil Abloh was saying something very interesting backstage at the Off-White show,
Pitti show.
at Pitti, that how important the department stores are now for them to actually show their product, because actually his customer is that high snobiety viewer. But with the department store, you can actually showcase your collection and really go into these special pieces, which, you know, the buyers are probably only going to buy a couple of. They're not going to go into quantity.
That's a really interesting point, because I think that has partly been the problem with products. You think like women with these huge budgets who adore fashion, they're getting their fashion news in a way from browsing Net-a-Porter and going in the new in section. It's like that's how they're keeping pace of interesting young designers and what have you. And like, you know, a lot of these biggie retailers and have been so clever at doing editorial content, partly because they obviously realise that they are more so than maybe
They
a
are
magazine.
all doing
They're
it.
educating
Matches,
people.
Net-a-Porter, they have huge teams.
But if Prada's missing from that, like how are you getting that moneyed woman who's really interested in new fashion, who wants to know about a new brand, who's keen to buy
Did
something?
Chanel try it out through Net-a-Porter?
They did a jewelry collaboration.
They started with jewelry.
Yeah. But
Because Chanel does a lot for its other product lines. You know, like Chanel still does things for its makeup line. It still does, you know, so even if it's not selling its ready to wear, it still has a big digital world for makeup, for, you know, there are other products. Fragrances.
I think what Off-White did at Pitti was amazing. It just shows what a brand should be doing today. It was a really strong narrative, very authentic. Jenny Holzer, great collaboration.
It felt like urgent in a way. I think that's the thing, is like these, if you're going to do a show, it has to feel like you have to give people a reason to watch it. Do you know what I mean? And I think
and it was special the way that you were viewing outside in the dark, but the lighting was illuminating the clothes. I mean, it was really quite beautiful what he's done.
So what would be our one big piece of advice for Prada? What do we think, what would we love to see happen? Do you want to get your teeth on their digital strategy?
I think just I suppose I agree that one of their strengths is video. So I think a shoppable video would be an experiment. In the first section, it would be quite easy, and they could do it in their way.
That's interesting. What about you, Mimma? What do you think?
Well, it's very hard for me to say because I've always been very Prada and for a long time, and I absolutely like what Miuccia does and what she stands for. So it's very hard for me to. I think she needs to push herself and find a way to do it her way, but the idea that Prada changes for me is hard, and yet I don't want it to disappear. So yeah, I think they're one of the pioneers with interesting video.
Well, they're
maybe
amazing
their video, they're
with
very,
content.
they're
Like
very
the fact that they have,
artistic. But also, they were the first to change the same store, same city, they were the first to work with architects. So maybe they also can use that to make it.
They need to be collaborating.
Exactly.
They need to be collaborating because if it's not
they
their
do
own,
with artists and
they do. But then
it
they need to
doesn't
bring that
translate
in.
to a digital sphere.
Because
even what they've done in Venice for many years. I mean, the problem is that those young people out there don't know, that they have a museum, that they have and I think it's amazing.
But there needs to be more crossover with the actual commercial aspect of the brand, and more synergy, because it's great that they're doing the art thing, and I agree, it's a real backbone for that type of customer, the customer who traditionally, wearing interesting clothes, the Prada and the Comme des Garçons, people that were gallerists or architects, what have you.
But they need to make it.
But yeah, more of a crossover of
I
products.
had this conversation with somebody about another brand, and the brand's, reinventing itself. But because it doesn't sell in any of the stores that I would go into, I will never see it because I never go into their stores. So I'm like, they need to be distributing in a couple of the stores that I actually go into, because unless they're in there, I will never see that product, how it's developed. So Prada, they need to work with people who have a great digital presence. They need to work. It doesn't have to be. It could be filmmakers. It could be artists. It could be gallerists. It could be anything which is a great communicator. They can collaborate with those people, because otherwise I won't see it, because I'm not following Prada personally. So I'm not looking at Prada. But if you want to bring in a new clientele, and presumably everybody does, and everybody wants to take a piece of the pie, is you go out there and you find out which person sits really well with my brand, that we can work together, that their communication can be talking about who Prada still is,
I think you're completely right. I think the problem is Prada expect people to come to them. And it's like in this cluttered digital place, you have to go to people and do that if you want a
I think
new
Prada
audience.
did do some really great retail initiatives. I think Katie Grant curated one of the, they had different stylists in different cities curate the store. I thought that was a great reason to go into a store and engage with the brand. I think things like that are brilliant.
Listen, they've always done great things. We all love it. It's just, if you're not watching Prada, how are you hearing about it?
So they need Karinna to find a way to.
But again, these hype and trend websites that we've been mentioning, it's funny because they'll see a backpack on one of these websites we're talking about, and they'll take it and put it on their website, and it's a story. So they're doing the job for the brand.
Well, that's what I think. That's the thing, is it's tapping into those people who will take what you do and communicate it out. And I mean, that's what I completely agree with what everyone's saying, because I find Prada fascinating. I find the people they collaborate with are the most interesting people. The art projects they do are the most interesting ones. But you just want more people to know about it. It's like, it is a bit like the art world, where it's within this box that only people who are in the art world find out about.
And to link it with the product also, so it makes it desirable to a new audience.
Well, on that note of things to come, shall we give her a round of applause for giving us so much to talk about?
Yeah.